The value of having a Northeast LGBTQ Education Summit is often there's a disjunction between the policies in the Northeast that tend to be a lot more progressive than in some areas of the country, and yet a lack of accountability sometimes for those policies actually taking hold. And so you still have situations and incidents of students who go to schools in the Northeast who identify as LGBTQ, teachers who identify as LGBTQ, really still struggling despite these policy and legislative changes. And so I think having a summit in the Northeast is a little bit different than the Deep South and other areas in that it's really about how do you begin to have conversation about how to ensure that not just the policies look great on the books, but that the real work is happening in school settings to affirm and be inclusive of LGBTQ students and as well as their educators.
In the Baltimore region, we talk about the idea of we teach who we are. And still in 2015, there is a stigma associated with being a part of our community. And so it's very important to have spaces where we can come together, fellowship, talk about pains, trials, tribulations, also successes, and then think about what does that mean for our community in the future.
I think some of the challenges to impacting school climate and culture are mindsets, especially mindsets of teachers and school leadership. Oftentimes LGBTQ students are invisible. They aren't students that necessarily come out and let you know how they're feeling.
Across the board, if you look at the statistics, LGBT youth are more likely to be harassed. They're more likely to skip school because they're afraid to go to school.
You know, whether they identify as LGBTQ or not, I think it's important that the students that do identify and don't have these conversations around these issues.
So I think we have the opportunity now, because we are being more vocal about accepting and loving yourself for who you are. We have the opportunity for many of our children, particularly our African American males, to feel safe and feel like they are included and do belong to a community that loves them.
Here's the reality. For many LGBT young people, particularly those of color, being LGBT is the last thing on the list of problems that they have in their lives or issues and challenges that they need to overcome. And so really understanding the whole person who comes to the table, both as a student and as a teacher or administrator, is critically important.
The first thing that comes to mind is looking at the representation of men of color in the classroom, being that it's 2% for Latinos and African Americans respectively, and just thinking about my education, not necessarily having a lot of educators that reflected who I was. I think it's really important to navigate those spaces of getting more representation. I think it's important to challenge that and make spaces more inclusive where people can feel comfortable and students can feel comfortable being all parts of their identity.
Brave education to me brings me back to the first day of teaching, and one of my students, my 6th grade students, raised her hand and said, hey mister, I don't mean nothing by it, but you gay? And I knew that I was going to come out, and I had spent my whole summer, thinking about what that might look like, and I wasn't sure I was going to do it the first day of school, but I did. And so for me, it was being open and honest and present with my students, bringing my whole self into the classroom.
To me, Brave Education is an education where students, staff members, community members have the space and the community to bring their fullest selves to the classroom, to their community, to their workplace. And there isn't shame and there isn't guilt associated with their identities.
And I just think Brave Education is showing up every day and being the best teacher possible.
Brave Education is being your most authentic self so that you can be your best self and serve your students in the way that they need to be supported.
Brave Education is teachers who are fighting for all of their students and making sure that all of them feel safe and protected in classrooms and in schools.
It's kind of being able to take that next step and being able to own it and saying, this is who I am, and just being able to kind of share that part of who you are.
Totally.
It's a long process, and it's a day-by-day thing, and it's kind of just thinking like, what is good in that moment, and eventually what is good in the future.
I think Brave Education is education that goes outside of the traditional academic growth measured by this many years of growth or achievement or mastery, to thinking about educating children as holistic individuals, like educating the whole person.
Despite the idea of progress with LGBT issues, I think education, ironically, is one of the slowest areas to actually have change. We feel that in order for the school culture and climate to change, we have to have some uncomfortable conversations about the reality that students pre-K to 12 don't all identify as straight, that a number of our students are not binary male or female, and that they need people as examples to them who are teaching and leading who also reflect that same diversity.